Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Certified mail. My name typed in cold, impersonal letters across the front. Inside was a 47-page lawsuit filed by my father, Richard Thompson, seeking $4.2 million in stolen family assets and unauthorized use of family business resources. I read it once. Then again. According to the complaint, I had somehow embezzled money from a family business I'd never worked for, stolen inheritance that had never existed, and defrauded my parents out of investments they'd never made. Page 23 contained my favorite section. Defendant lacks the financial sophistication, business acumen, or resources to mount meaningful opposition to these claims. Summary judgment is recommended given the defendant's demonstrated incompetence in financial matters. My phone buzzed. Mom's text. Their attorney is a family friend. Mitchell and Ross has never lost a case. Just sign the settlement papers when they arrive. I set the phone down and stared out my apartment window at the Seattle skyline. They had no idea who they were suing. But they were about to find out. I'd been the family disappointment for as long as I could remember. My older brother, David, was the golden child. Harvard Law. Partner at a prestigious firm by 32. Married to a surgeon. 2 perfect children. The son my father actually wanted. My younger sister, Amanda, was the princess. Marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company. Engaged to a venture capitalist. The daughter who married up and made mom proud at country club lunches. Then there was me, Emma. The quirky one who'd gone to a state school instead of an Ivy. The one who worked in some finance thing that nobody could quite explain at dinner parties. The one who drove a 7-year-old Honda and lived in a modest apartment instead of the suburban mansion my siblings preferred. Emma works with numbers, Mom would say dismissively at family gatherings as if accounting were barely above janitorial work in respectability. Dad was more direct. My daughter wastes her potential doing paperwork for other people's money. Neither of them had ever asked what I actually did. If they had, they might have learned that at 29, I was Senior Vice President of Investment Strategy at Cascade Wealth Management, one of the Pacific Northwest's largest private equity firms. They might have learned that I personally managed a portfolio worth $840 million. They might have learned that my paperwork involved advising billionaires, family offices, and institutional investors on where to deploy their capital. They might have learned that my personal net worth was $127 million. But they never asked. And I never told them. Not out of spite. Out of strategy. I'd learned early that my family treated money like blood in the water. When my grandmother died and left me $50,000 for college, my parents borrowed $30,000 of it for Amanda's wedding and never paid it back. When I received a $10,000 signing bonus from my first real job, Dad told me I owed the family at least half for raising me. So I learned to be invisible. I learned to appear poor. I learned to let them believe I was struggling while I built an empire they couldn't touch. I wasn't hiding. I was watching. And over the years I'd watched everything. My career had been built on patience, precision, and perfect timing. After graduating with a finance degree from the University of Washington, just a state school, as Dad loved to remind people, I joined a small investment firm as a junior analyst. I worked 80-hour weeks. I learned everything. I made connections. By 24, I'd been recruited by Cascade Wealth Management. By 26, I was managing my first fund. By 28, I was overseeing institutional portfolios. The money came gradually, then suddenly. A $500,000 bonus here. A $1.2 million performance incentive there. Stock options that vested at exactly the right moment. Carried interest from funds that exceeded their benchmarks. I lived modestly. Invested aggressively. Compounded relentlessly. By my 29th birthday, my personal portfolio had crossed $100 million. My family knew none of this. To them, I was still Emma who works with spreadsheets, and probably makes $60,000 a year, and really should have married that accountant she dated in college. I attended family dinners and said nothing while they discussed their latest purchases. I smiled politely when Amanda showed off her engagement ring worth at least $40,000. I nodded when David talked about his vacation home in Aspen. I never mentioned my own real estate portfolio, A penthouse in Seattle, a beach house in Maui, and a ski cabin in Whistler. I never mentioned my art collection, carefully curated with pieces from emerging artists who'd since exploded in value. I never mentioned that I'd been profiled in Forbes' 30 Under 30 Finance Edition, or that I regularly spoke at conferences, or that institutional investors flew me first class to New York and London to get my advice. I kept it all quiet, because I knew that the moment my family learned I had money, they would want it. I just didn't expect them to sue me for it. The complaint made increasingly absurd claims. I had allegedly diverted family business funds, despite never working for any family business. I had supposedly stolen my grandmother's inheritance, even though she'd left me exactly $50,000 in a will that was probated and distributed years ago. I had reportedly defrauded my parents out of promised investments that existed only in their imagination. It took 3 phone calls to understand what was really happening. The first call was to my cousin Rachel, who'd stayed neutral in family politics. "Your dad's business is collapsing," she said quietly. "His commercial real estate company is $8.3 million in debt. They've got balloon payments due in 60 days. If he doesn't pay, he loses everything." The second call was to a friend who worked in banking. "Richard Thompson? Yeah, he came to us for a loan last month. Wanted $5 million. We ran his financials and, let's just say, we declined." The third call was to my brother David's wife, Sarah, who'd always been kind to me. "David told me to stay out of it," she said carefully. "But Emma, they think you're rich. Someone saw an article about you in a finance magazine. They think you're hiding money from them. Your dad actually said, if Emma has wealth, it belongs to this family." That's when I understood. This wasn't about justice. This was about desperation. Dad's business was failing. He needed money. And rather than ask me, rather than admit he'd been wrong about me all these years, he decided to take what he thought I had. The lawsuit wasn't a legal strategy. It was a shakedown. They assumed I'd settle rather than expose my finances in court. They assumed I'd be too embarrassed to fight back. They assumed wrong. I called my attorney, Marcus Chin, a partner at Seattle's most prestigious litigation firm. "Emma, this complaint is garbage," he said after reading it. "There's no legal basis for any of these claims. We can get this dismissed." "I don't want it dismissed," I said. "I want a trial." "A trial? Emma, that's expensive and time-consuming, and I want them to see everything," I said. "Every asset. Every account. Every single thing they said I'd never achieve. I want it entered into public record. I want a judge to see exactly who filed this frivolous lawsuit and why." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "Okay. Let's destroy them." We spent 3 weeks preparing. Marcus subpoenaed my employment records from Cascade Wealth Management, showing my title, compensation history, and performance reviews. We gathered statements from my portfolio accounts. Checking, savings, investment accounts, brokerage statements, real estate holdings, retirement accounts. We compiled my tax returns for the past 7 years, showing declared income ranging from $780,000 to $3.2 million annually. We collected documentation of every asset, property deeds, car titles, stock certificates, partnership agreements. We prepared expert testimony from forensic accountants who'd trace every dollar I'd ever earned back to legitimate sources. And then Marcus made a call I'll never forget. "Miss Parker? This is Marcus Chin. I represent Emma Thompson in a civil matter. I understand you're the president of First National Bank, where Emma holds several accounts. Yes, I'm calling to ask if you'd be willing to testify about the nature and value of those accounts. You would? Excellent. I'll send over the subpoena." He hung up and smiled at me. "The president of your bank is willing to personally appear in court to authenticate your portfolio statements. She said any attempt to claim you're financially unsophisticated is defamatory to one of her best clients." I smiled back. "When's the hearing?" 2 weeks. Perfect. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Thursday in King County Superior Court. I arrived at 8:45. Dressed in a charcoal gray suit from Armani that cost more than my father thought I made in a month. My hair was pulled back in a simple bun. No jewelry except a Patek Philippe watch that had been a gift to myself when my portfolio first crossed $50 million. Marcus met me outside the courtroom. "They're already inside. Your whole family came." "Good," I said. Let them watch. We entered the courtroom. Dad sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, a man named Gerald Ross from Mitchell and Ross. Dad wore his important business suit and his smuggest expression. Mom sat in the gallery behind him whispering to Amanda. David sat next to his wife looking uncomfortable. They all stared at me as I walked to the defendant's table. Mom's eyes went to my suit, my watch, my leather briefcase. I saw confusion flicker across her face. The bailiff called, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison." Judge Morrison was a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. She'd been a litigator for 20 years before being appointed to the bench. She took her seat and reviewed the case file. Thompson versus Thompson. This is a hearing on plaintiff's motion for summary judgment and defendant's countermotion to dismiss with sanctions. Gerald Ross stood. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. The defendant has misappropriated family assets and... Mr. Ross, Judge Morrison interrupted. I've read your complaint. I've also read the defendant's response. Before we proceed, I'd like to understand the factual basis for your claims. What specific assets did Ms. Thompson allegedly misappropriate? Gerald looked flustered. Your Honor, the family business funds that... Which business? Ms. Thompson has never been employed by any business owned by the plaintiff. Well, the inheritance that... The inheritance from Sarah Thompson, the defendant's grandmother, which was properly probated in 2018 and distributed according to the will? Your Honor, it's the principle of... Mr. Ross, I'm asking for facts, not principles. What specific, documented assets are you claiming the defendant stole? Gerald looked at my father. Dad's confident expression was starting to crack. Your Honor, Gerald said slowly, we believe the defendant has been hiding significant assets that rightfully belong to the family and... Hiding assets? Judge Morrison looked over her glasses. From whom? The defendant is 29 years old and financially independent. She has no legal obligation to disclose her personal finances to her parents. But Your Honor, does the plaintiff have any documented evidence that any of the defendant's assets were obtained through illegal means? No, Your Honor, but... Does the plaintiff have any evidence that the defendant signed any agreement to share her earnings with the family? No, Your Honor, but the family has certain expectations. Mr. Ross, Judge Morrison's voice was ice. This court deals in law, not expectations. Do you have any legal basis for this lawsuit whatsoever? The courtroom was silent. Gerald Ross looked like a man who'd just realized he was standing in quicksand. Your Honor, he said weakly, if we could just review the defendant's financial situation, I'm confident we can demonstrate. Oh, we're absolutely going to review the defendant's financial situation, Judge Morrison said. Ms. Chin, I assume you have documentation prepared? Marcus stood. Yes, Your Honor. And we have a witness who can authenticate the defendant's portfolio. Proceed. Marcus nodded to the bailiff who opened the courtroom doors. Christine Parker walked in. She was 53 years old, impeccably dressed, and radiated the quiet authority that comes from running a multi-billion-dollar financial institution. My mother's mouth fell open. Christine approached the bench, was sworn in and took the witness stand. Ms. Parker, Marcus began, please state your name and occupation for the record. Christine Parker. I'm President and CEO of First National Bank, Northwest Region. And in that capacity, do you have knowledge of the defendant Emma Thompson's banking relationships with your institution? I do. Ms. Thompson has been a client of First National for 7 years. Given the size of her portfolio, I personally oversee her accounts. Can you describe the nature of those accounts? Christine smiled slightly. Ms. Thompson maintains several accounts with our institution. A primary checking account, a high-yield savings account, 3 investment portfolios, and a commercial real estate trust account. And the total value of those accounts? Christine pulled out a bound document. As of yesterday's close of business, the total value of Emma Thompson's accounts at First National Bank is $127,382,441.67. The number hung in the air like a bomb. Dad's face went completely white. Mom made a sound like she'd been punched. Amanda's eyes were huge. David just stared. Judge Morrison leaned forward. I'm sorry, did you say $127 million? Yes, Your Honor. Christine handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. This is a certified statement of all accounts. Every dollar is documented, sourced, and legally obtained through Ms. Thompson's employment and investments. Judge Morrison reviewed the document. Her eyebrows rose higher with each page. Ms. Parker, Marcus continued, in your professional opinion, would you describe the defendant as financially unsophisticated or lacking resources to mount meaningful opposition, as stated in the plaintiff's complaint? Christine actually laughed. Absolutely not. Ms. Thompson is one of the most financially sophisticated clients I've ever worked with. She's a senior executive at one of the region's top investment firms. Describing her as financially unsophisticated would be like calling a neurosurgeon medically incompetent. Thank you, Ms. Parker. No further questions. Judge Morrison looked at Gerald Ross. Cross-examination. Gerald just shook his head mutely. Ms. Parker, you're excused. Judge Morrison waited until Christine left, then turned to my father. Mr. Thompson, did you know your daughter had over $127 million in assets when you filed this lawsuit? Dad couldn't speak. He just shook his head. Did you make any effort to verify the claims in your complaint before filing? Another head shake. Did you have any evidence whatsoever that your daughter obtained any of her wealth through illegal means? No, Dad whispered. Judge Morrison's expression turned to stone. Mr. Ross, your client has filed a completely frivolous lawsuit against his own daughter, making defamatory claims about her financial competence while demanding money she earned through her own labor and skill. This complaint alleges theft of assets that never existed, embezzlement from a business she never worked for, and fraud in transactions that never occurred. She picked up her gavel. I am granting the defendant's motion to dismiss with prejudice. Furthermore, I am sanctioning the plaintiff $50,000 for filing a frivolous lawsuit, to be paid to the defendant within 30 days. Mr. Ross, I'm referring this matter to the State Bar for review of your professional conduct. And Mr. Thompson, if you ever file another lawsuit like this, I will hold you in contempt. The gavel came down. This hearing is adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Dad sat frozen at the plaintiff's table, his face the color of ash. Mom was crying, but not sad tears, angry, humiliated tears. Amanda had her head in her hands. David was trying to comfort his wife, who looked mortified. I stood calmly, gathered my briefcase, and walked toward the exit. Emma. Dad's voice cracked. Emma, wait. I turned. He stumbled toward me, Gerald Ross trying to hold him back. You have $127 million? Dad's voice was hoarse. How? You work in finance. How do you have that much money? I earned it, I said simply. The same way you were supposed to earn yours. Through work. But you never told us. We're your family. You should have. Should have what? Kept my voice level. Should have given it to you. Like the college fund you stole? Like every dollar I ever made that you said belonged to the family? We raised you. We deserve. You deserve nothing, I said quietly. You sued me for $4.2 million claiming I stole from you. You put in writing that I'm financially incompetent. You tried to take everything I built because your business failed. My business failed because you made bad decisions. Because you overextended. Because you gambled and lost. That's not my fault. That's not my problem. And it's sure as hell not my responsibility to fix. Mom appeared at Dad's shoulder. Emma, you can't just walk away from family. We need help. Your father needs. My father, I said, needs to learn the same lesson he tried to teach me my entire life. That you earn what you get. You always told me I'd never amount to anything. You said I wasted my potential. You dismissed everything I did. I looked at each of them. You were wrong. About all of it. And instead of being happy for me, instead of being proud, you sued me. We didn't know, Amanda said weakly. If we'd known. If you'd known, you would have asked me for money years ago. You would have treated me differently. You would have pretended to respect me. And that's exactly why I never told you. I turned to Marcus. We're done here. As we walked toward the doors, David caught up to me. Emma, wait. I'm sorry. I should have stopped this. I knew it was wrong, but Dad was so sure, and you're an attorney, I said. You read that complaint. You knew it was garbage. But you said nothing because you thought there might be money in it for you too. His face reddened. That's not. Save it. I pushed open the courtroom doors. The judge's ruling is public record. By tomorrow, everyone in your firm will know you backed a frivolous lawsuit against your own sister. Good luck with that. I walked out into the Seattle morning. Behind me I heard Mom shouting, Dad pleading, Amanda crying. I didn't look back. The $50,000 sanction was paid within 28 days, 2 days before the deadline. Dad's attorney, Gerald Ross, was reprimanded by the State Bar Association for failing to conduct adequate due diligence before filing. Dad's commercial real estate business collapsed 6 weeks after the hearing. The properties were foreclosed. He filed for bankruptcy protection. Mom stopped speaking to me entirely, which was honestly a relief. Amanda sent one text. Was it worth destroying your family? I didn't respond. David sent a formal email apologizing and asking if we could rebuild our relationship. I deleted it. But Rachel, my cousin, called to tell me something interesting. The family had a meeting, she said. About you. Your aunt asked why you'd let your father's business fail when you could have saved it. What did they say? Your uncle, you know, the honest one, said, why would she save a man who sued her? And your mom said, because family is supposed to help family. And your uncle said, you mean the way Richard helped Emma? By suing her? That kind of family help. I smiled. How did that go over? Not well. But Emma, some of them are starting to understand. Not your parents. They're too proud. But the others are realizing they treated you terribly. Good, I said. Maybe they'll treat the next family scapegoat better. 3 months after the hearing, I received a different kind of letter. This one was handwritten from my grandmother's sister, my great-aunt Helen, who was 92 and had always been kind to me. Dear Emma, your grandmother would have been so proud of you. Not because of the money, though Lord knows that's impressive, but because you built something real. You didn't take shortcuts. You didn't use people. You earned everything you have. He always knew you were special. She told me once that you were the only one in the family who understood the difference between being given things and earning things. I'm sorry your father sued you. I'm sorry your family treated you the way they did. But I'm not sorry you fought back. Some people need to learn that their actions have consequences. Keep being magnificent. Love, Aunt Helen. I framed that letter and hung it in my office. I still work at Cascade Wealth Management. I was promoted to managing director last month, overseeing $1.2 billion in assets. My personal portfolio has grown to $138 million. I bought another property, a vineyard in Napa Valley that I'm converting into a retreat center for women in finance. I donate generously to scholarships for first-generation college students. I mentor young professionals who, like me, came from families that didn't believe in them. And I sleep extremely well at night. My family's lawsuit taught me something valuable. That the people who claim you owe them everything are usually the ones who gave you nothing. My father wanted $4.2 million because his business failed. Instead, he got a court judgment for $50,000 against him, a destroyed reputation, and a bankruptcy filing. More importantly, he got the truth. That the daughter he dismissed as a failure had built an empire worth more than he'd ever see in his lifetime. That the daughter he claimed was financially incompetent managed more money before lunch than he'd earned in his career. That the daughter he sued for stolen assets had earned every single dollar through talent, hard work, and strategic brilliance. The courthouse is 10 blocks from my office. Sometimes I walk past it on my lunch break. I think about that moment when Christine Parker said $127 million and watched my father's face go pale. I think about the judge's gavel coming down. I think about walking out of that courtroom with my head high. And I smile. Because the best revenge isn't just success. It's succeeding so completely that your detractors can't even comprehend the level you've reached. My dad's lawsuit said I had no defense. Turns out I had $127 million of them.